Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, members, I will not be long, I promise. My members threaten to vote the other way if I speak for longer than 5 minutes, so I will be brief, I promise, because you've heard from me a lot on this bill through many committee hearings and also on the floor here. I just want to say that I don't recognize the bill that's being described by folks who don't intend to vote for it. I wouldn't vote for that bill myself. That's not the bill that's in front of us. All of the concern and all of the heartache around some of the characterizations, the expense. Senator Uyghur talked about some of the expense drivers that were in an earlier version of the bill, which, by the way, I never accepted the full costs that were developed. But to the extent that there were costs, we worked very hard to bring some of those cost drivers very far down. The idea that somehow we know best in St. Paul, and this is a top-down mandate, and no one who runs schools is supporting this. Members, this bill was written by literally hundreds and hundreds of people around the state who engaged in this effort to talk about what works and what doesn't and what the reality of their lives is. Members and folks who are observing this process, a lot has been said about this bill, and it can be said a dozen, 100 times. It doesn't make those assertions any more true. It just doesn't. The Climate Center that we now call the Technical Assistance Resource Center is an effort that schools can access on their own initiative. The adoption of policies. School districts are encouraged to work with their communities and their parents to develop those policies. The policies are not spelled out in specific detail. Sure, there are some elements to them that would cause them to work effectively, because we worked with school districts and principals and administrators and students and teachers and parents to talk about what's working and what's not working right now. I'm glad so many of you talked to a lot of superintendents and school board members, but you know who we talked to? I didn't hear anyone talk about sitting down with literally dozens of kids, numerous occasions, hundreds of kids over the course of several years, and their parents, and their teachers, and their counselors, and their social workers. In school districts where superintendents and others were telling us, oh, we're doing this just great. And I'm sure that superintendents are striving to do well by their kids, and principals are striving to do well by their kids, but something's not working. And it shouldn't matter where a kid lives in order for them to be safe when they go to school. The research doesn't lie. Our own University of Minnesota shows that it occurs in far too many kids' lives. The kids tell us themselves. They came forward. These incredibly courageous kids came to the state capitol numerous times. Some of them are up in the gallery with us today to talk about the pain and the isolation and the marginalization and the fear and how alone they felt. Imagine that in a Senate hearing room, sitting at those big oak tables, all the senators looking down the long table at you. You're a kid, and you're speaking about the reality of theirs. That's how this bill was written, and that's what this bill is responsive to. And it's not some sort of fiction. It's driven by the practices and the experience of where things are going on today that are very successful. My own school district, St. Paul, Noka-Hennepin, many others. This is a good bill. It provides for that balance of local initiative and control, provides for some elements of policies and practices so things are well communicated, they're recognized when they're seen, there's some training, some resources, so people have tools to respond in an appropriate fashion. just some good practices, some components that outline some good practices. The particulars are left to school districts to determine for themselves in conversation with the professionals and the parents. And then if schools want to take another step and engage in some other activities around prevention, making sure that all kids who walk in those doors, no matter their difference, are welcome, they can do that on their own initiative. And if they want, they can reach out to some folks who are looking at best practices and research. And by the way, that center is guided by the work of a council. And who's on the council? Members of our community, people who are running our schools, the students themselves. This is not about St. Paul and bureaucracy. This is about a larger, wider engagement in addressing something that simply has not been addressed well in far too many places in Minnesota, where people aspire to do well by our kids. And they're asking us for a foundation and policy and some help to do that. Like I said, I do not recognize this bill that the opponents describe. I would not vote for that bill, but I would vote for the bill that's in front of us, because I think it's the first step that's been long awaited. And it's been asked of us and demanded of us by those young people that we represent. And we have turned a cold shoulder to them for far too long. Think of my good friend Jake, who's with us, who had to change schools because they wouldn't respond to his concerns. Time and again, Elise Coffin, who came and spoke to us about her experience. She also had to move across town and change schools. Nabil, young Muslim man who was harassed for his faith tradition and his cultural background. Alexa, who was told by one of her administrators, sometimes the best course of action is to do nothing. I'm really, really optimistic, and I'm really happy, and I'm really hopeful today, because I think those kids across our state who are avoiding going to school, who feel so alone, so isolated, so marginalized, they're going to hear about something that happened in St. Paul today, that they were heard by a state legislature. They were moved to hear by a movement that was built by kids themselves. And they were heard by a state legislature and a governor who wanted to reach out to them and their parents and the schools and the school districts to try to step down a more positive path for them. So members, please vote green. Please listen to the young people. And please know that this is a good bill. It's been through a lot of work, and it's going to be implemented very effectively, and it's going to be a great step forward for young people. So thank you very much, members.